as a reminder, this is being recorded and will find itself on YouTube. Um, okay, so scribe wise, who can?
I can scribe.
Okay, cool. And for the next call, we can probably set that at the face to face because, like, I'm guessing, like, it's gonna be a couple of weeks after the face to face, so we can set it at that point, if that makes sense. Okay. So for the face to face, a few things. If you're planning to attend either in person or remotely and you haven't signed up in the linked form from the agenda, please do so. That goes for both the first day, which is like a general design day, as well as the second day, in which we're planning a hackathon to work on the various issues in the existing spec. If you can attend, like, those are in two separate forms because because that's how I set it up. But please sign up for either, or like, please sign up for both. Ideally, if even if you can't attend, it would be good if you can sign up to say that you won't be attending. And otherwise, regarding the face-to-face, Ilya, Todd, and me, we met up over the last few days to talk a bit about the agenda and shaped it up a bit. There's an agenda doc linked from the face-to-face. I can... yeah. I can try to... Or can anyone present... Todd, can you present the agenda doc? Because I'm recording it. It will mess up the recording.
Yeah, give me a moment. I don't have it currently up.
Okay. Okay, but generally the broad division that we thought would work for the day is to dedicate the morning to various use cases and needs. So have folks that are not necessarily working on browsers, but more users of the APIs than creators of the APIs, to talk about how they use them, which parts are great, which parts are still missing, and what use cases are we totally lacking in terms of performance needs and measurement gaps. So that
to share, can folks see it?
No. Okay, and now we see it.
Great.
Cool. Okay, so that's the part that we thought to dedicate for the morning, where the format would be more or less 20 minutes per person, with a short presentation followed by questions and discussions. And then we thought of in the afternoon, do a bunch of updates related to new platform features, talk a little bit about metrics for single page apps. That is a subject that keeps coming back as a pain point, or an unaddressed use case. So we'd love to discuss that a bit and understand, like, get a better understanding of if we can tackle that. And Then memory, talk about JavaScript and frameworks needs, where we also, like, I'm not sure if this part should be part of the morning or part of the afternoon, but we need um, to see what scheduling needs we have for those frameworks, what other needs we have for those frameworks. It can also tie into the single page app matrix discussion. So that's a pretty broad subject. And then finally, we thought of closing the day with a discussion regarding the a meta discussion on the processes, and see if people are happy with the current process and what can we do to make it better. Does that broad outline work for folks? Is there anything we're missing? Anything you would like to discuss that is not, like, doesn't fit into any of those larger buckets? Anyone?
So for this agenda, there are people presenting use cases. Like use cases for existing specs or new features and new APIs? What?
Either or. If people have use cases that can be addressed by extending existing specifications, that's great. If they have use cases that fall that don't fall under any one of the current specifications, any one of the current features, but still seems like something that falls under the scope of the working group, that's also great. And it's like, we don't expect people to come with solutions, but just present their problems and then we can discuss them.
So one thing we did in the web components face to face a couple months ago that was very useful was like people to present how they're using existing technologies, also present what shortcomings are, because otherwise you can end up in a situation where you end up focusing on things that doesn't work and then all things that are working right now. Does that make sense? Like, I'm afraid that, like, if the format is that talking about these use cases, I'm a bit afraid that that might end up being focused too much on the things that or look for things that we need to add as opposed to things that's already working. And
I think that's consistent with what we're aiming for here. So, for example, I can speak some of the topics that Marcel was interested to talk about with his experience of implementing some of the performance primitives and tracking across Google properties. So the idea there is to present the kinds of things that they've done, the learnings along the way, and perhaps that leads to some discussion on gaps that we have in the platform or not. But just kind of help inform how the experts are actually using these tools out in the wild.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I think it'll be really good to understand how people are using these tools and what has worked for them, right? I can also much about what might be lacking, but just embodying existing APIs would be good.
I think in general, the folks that I've spoken with, my coaching to them has been come ready to show off how you measure performance in the real world and be ready to describe the tricky workarounds you have to implement to enable your websites to measure things and the gaps of things you can't measure but wish you could. Which sort of hit those buckets.
You're going to say something.
Does that make sense, Chris?
Okay, sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. otherwise, anyone like so for the use cases bucket, anything you see here that is not like any segment of the industry that is not represented here and should be from your perspective?
Sorry, are you asking us?
Yeah, if or like generally the group, if anyone sees, okay, I see that, yeah. So for CDN, I don't know, Nick, are you going to talk about the analytics side of things or?
Yeah, I mean, that's more in my wheelhouse. I was hoping to solicit some feedback from people internal to see what else they would want me to bring up. So I may have other things, but I would say probably the majority of it is from the monitoring point of view.
Okay.
Should we talk about how we might want to reorganize specifications? There's also the topic of like effective refactoring and merging and resource timing and navigation timing and stuff like that. For L3, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it might discuss that?
So for me, that is more of a discussion for the issue related hackathon, because it's not something that we need to figure out as a group where we want to go. It's just something like work needs to be done, and then we can figure out what work and how that work will be divided on the second day as part of the issue discussions.
But do we have a concrete idea on how exactly we want to reorganize specifications? Though I thought that was still up in a debate.
I think that we have a pretty good idea of merging resource timing and navigation timing because they have interdependency, and then for other specifications, we weren't talking about merging all of them into a single, performance spec. That is not something that was.
So we could reserve a little bit of time at the end on the last process section of how we work together, right? We could at a minimum recap what we believe is the current consensus, or at least the latest on what we've agreed on, and see if everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Cool. Ben, I saw that you added the Cloudflare or CDNs to the list. Do you know if any of them, like someone from Cloudflare or another CDN, can attend to present?
I don't know. I was just putting that out there as a...
Okay. Okay, so we can try to reach out and see, unless unless Nick will have the CDN side of Akamai as well as the analytics side of Akamai covered, but yeah. Okay, and for the afternoon sessions, any large topic that we're missing that we should discuss, given the time constraints, obviously, but any obvious holes that we haven't covered? Okay, cool.
So if you folks do have suggestions, please feel free to drop in comments or just edit the doc directly, and then we can figure out how to split the time.
Yeah, and with regard to the second day, so far, last time I looked, we had around 20 people in person for the first day, maybe a bit more, and only 8 for the second day for the issue hackathon. Are folks on the call, like will folks on the call be able to join? And if so, can you subscribe on the forum? Yeah, because basically, yeah, it would be great to have more people working. Cool. So Philippe, you're there?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, awesome.
Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I just need to check the schedule to see if I can attend the second day.
Okay.
I will go do that today, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Cool. And with that, with face-to-face discussions out of the way, Nicholas, do you want to talk a bit about element timing and shadow DOM?
Oh, sorry. Before going to that topic, can I ask one question?
Sure.
For the TPAC, there appears to be already a schedule out. Are we going to start talking about the agenda for TPAC soon as well?
Sure. I was thinking we'll maybe after the face-to-face, because there's still we're still a few months out. But generally, like the broad strokes is that we're meeting up on Monday and Tuesday. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, and but we haven't yet started dividing it. We are likely to do like we did in the past, one day talking about new designs and one day talking about issue triage. And if there's a preference for which day is which in terms of conflicts with other groups, please let us know. But otherwise, for the detailed split between those days, we haven't yet started working on that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of why I was asking, because there might be some discussions I might need to attend for CSS working group. So, yeah, I guess I have to check with the CSS working group agenda as well.
Okay. Yeah. If you or anyone else you have obvious conflicts, let us know, and we can probably discuss this. In the face to face, but like either if we'll have time or after the event or before the event, we can draw out broad lines of what our agenda for TPAC may look like.
Yeah, I would expect we'll start putting that agenda together pretty quickly in late June in terms of its rough shape. The actual topics, though, have a tendency to show up around a month before.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And with that, Nicholas.
Sure. So, well, these are more like open questions rather than design presentations. So the first one is element timing interaction with shadow DOM. So I just put an issue there in the agenda. It's basically asking how we can expose information from performance information from shadow elements to basically the window of that contains those that contains a shadow tree. So this is something that I think would be desirable because obviously there may be some web components that are super big, and if we simply ignore all of the shadow trees, and nested shadow trees as well, then that gives us a very limited insight into the performance of our website. But there is some conflict as well with the encapsulation principles of Shadow DOM. So after some discussion, T. Kent, who's like someone from Google, suggested two possible solutions. One of them is having a performance observer scoped to a shadow root instead of scoped to a window, which would mean that a web component author would be able to get the performance information from such scoped performance observer, because it'll be able to register it for its own web component, and then potentially, if it wants, it can fire events to the frame to expose its performance information to the website that is using the web component. But maybe they won't necessarily do that. And the other alternative that was suggested was having a Boolean in the attach shadow root method, or attach shadow. Attach shadow. That is a Boolean saying that the performance information for this shadow tree should be exposed to the performance observer of the window, which is basically saying that the author is okay with its shadow element timing information being exposed to regular performance observer. So those are the two proposals that were suggested. So I was wondering what folks think about it, and if they have other ideas in mind for solving this problem.
Like, first of all, is the problem clear to folks, or
maybe not?
Yeah.
It is clear to me, but perhaps.
Well, the problem being described is clear, but I think Ryosuke is probably the only person on the call with Shadow DOM expertise to be part of the conversation of what the solution is.
Yes. So the solution is not like, the question is perhaps not how we wanna resolve it particularly, because yes, this is something that will have to be decided talking to the web components folks. But in principle, the pieces where we need to decide is, do we think that exposing performance entries to a shadow root is the right thing? And there will be some discrepancies here because, for example, if a custom element is triggering long tasks or triggering resource downloads, those will be exposed on the document, not on the shadow root. The shadow root piece, at least like from discussions that we had, is mostly, it makes sense potentially for element related information, so element timing, but not for other things necessarily. And we will have to see if this, if this is something that makes sense from a developer perspective.
I think it would be useful to have more information on the cases where one might not want their shadow root timing information exposed to the global collection of timing information. Because, naively thinking, a website developer wants to find out what's slow, and if their shadow root use is slow, they want to know about it and not have a million places to look for it. But that's just because I haven't thought through why would one want to hide or prevent this information from being collected globally?
But the basic idea is encapsulation. You don't want implementation details.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of shadow root. So just think about built-in element. Like if you have a built-in element, you don't want what the built-in element is doing to be leaked into the user.
Yeah.
It's a similar.
Right. And if we start exploring the possibility where we have a Boolean to say whether we, when attaching the shadow root, to say whether we want the performance timing to be included or not, is this the only global-like thing that should be included, or are there other things of more global scopes that we might want to throw in there later?
Okay, so a general bubbling information, general information bubbling channel.
Who are the websites that are the primary users of Shadow DOM right now, who may be able to answer what the developers of sites using this would want? Salesforce, YouTube. It's a pretty short list, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of broad usage, but there's like a few big ones.
Yeah.
Right. What I wonder is, rather than thinking about this theoretically, would it make more sense to just ask a couple of the big folks using this? I guess I'm wondering if we need to solve this problem right now, or if it's possible to come up with a flip a coin answer for now and wait till we hear feedback the other way.
Well, the flip a coin would basically be don't expose anything right now, though, right? Because if once we start exposing something, then going back is going to be more complicated, I think. So yeah, we can definitely halt for now, but it's a good idea to ask major users, although they might have a different perspective than someone who implements web components that are meant to be used mostly as third-party web components, right?
Oh, right, yeah, that's a good point. Are there people who are distributing third-party web components?
I mean, if the point is to encapsulate and...
Well, so Salesforce does this thing where they have a third-party vendors who build components and have them posted on their application. So it is sort of hard requirement that they don't want any component to have access to any other component.
And Steven, are you on the call still?
Yeah, I'm there. That's correct. So what Ryosiki said is exactly correct. So me, what I can do is to go back to the team who's designing our framework based on web components, and talk to them and report in, maybe either talk to Nico or report back next call.
Yeah, and there's an open issue, so feel free to also chime in on the issue and share opinions there. But my read from the group is that there is no strong preference either way, and it's mostly related to the developer.
I would say we definitely shouldn't do the Boolean thing.
Okay.
That's a bad design. Because then you end up with a situation where people just opting to expose things, and then naively and down the line they don't realize the encapsulation is completely broken.
Okay. So you would have preferred exposing those entries on the shadow root and then have the component itself actively expose that to the document if that makes sense for them?
So the design of a web component is that the owner of the shadow root always should have the say on whether things inside the shadow root is exposed or not.
Yeah.
So control should be given to the person who attached the shadow root. I'm not certain adding a performance object on the shadow root is the right choice, though. There might be other options, like in a selection, our current proposal is to have, for those who are not familiar with the selection API, the way you get the selection right now is you call the window.getSelection, and then that object exposes a bunch of information, namely range. GetSelection.getRange@0 will give you the DOM range that spans, that represents where the user had selected. The problem with that approach, obviously, is that the range cannot expose things inside a shadow root. So the way we work around it is that we're going to add a new method called getComposedRange, where the function takes the list of shadow roots that you have access to, and then if you have access to a given shadow root, and then the static range become by getComposedRange would include the nodes inside a shadow root, those shadow roots that are being passed to the function. So that's another approach, right? Some of the functions like performance observer or like get entries on a performance timeline, for example, could take a list of shadow roots it has the caller has access to, and that could get entries that belongs to the given shadow root. That's an alternative design. I'm not saying that that's necessarily better design, but I'm saying that those are like probably that's another option, and I'm sure there are a few other options to give
Okay.
to the.
Right. I do wonder if some of web components people would be okay with that, because my understanding from Anna's position is that you should not expose open nor closed, and I'm not sure in that case you would be exposing any open shadow roots, right? No.
No. The way the getComposedRange works is that it takes the shadow root object, and you wouldn't get the shadow root object unless you have access to the shadow root.
So you would suggest passing the shadow root object as in the observe call, I guess.
For example. No. It's not to the observe call. Oh, sure, yeah, to the observe call, yeah, right. When you observe an element, you can pass the list of shadow roots you have access to, and then you get entries on that.
Right. Which is more or less, well, it's not the same as a performance observer scoped to the shadow root, but it augments the scope, I guess.
Well, I mean, entry definitely needs to be scoped by shadow root. Like, it's simply not okay to have a Boolean where it adds an entry to the global object. Like, if anybody were to ever suggest such an API anywhere on the web platform, people working on web components say, no, we don't do that. That is not okay.
All right.
Okay.
So, yep.
Yeah.
Anything else about that topic? Or I think we have some.
Yeah, I think we have a rough idea, and yeah, folks that are either have opinions because they're using web components, or opinions because they're part of the specifications of web components. Yeah, feel free to chime in on the issue, and we can figure that out later. I think that the first step would be to not necessarily expose element timing on this until this is decided, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second issue, on the last call, we talked about supported entry types and the registry versus registration models. We decided on a registry. Philippe went ahead and published a note that forms this registry, and but now a couple days ago we had Ryosuke chiming in on the issue, saying that a registration model is significantly better. So I guess the question is, do we continue forward with the registry model, given the work that Philippe already did on that front, or the registration is a significantly superior model? And I guess Ryosuke, the question is, in terms of how strongly do you feel about the registration model versus the registry model?
I mean, I think the registration model would work. My concern, well, I was just raising the concern that Boris mentioned, right? I was echoing his opinion that, like, if we have a central, I mean, we had a DOM features, supports feature function, which basically didn't do anything useful because everyone said that they would support all the features, even if they did not. So that's the risk. If you have a centralized list of features, somebody will just like, naively come in and just add all of the things, right? Obviously, that risk is mitigated if you took the strategy that you described of, like, test each value is being tested in each spec, right? So as long as we don't have one test that says like, oh, verify that all these values are present, that might be okay.
Yeah, and anyway, we plan to have the tests spread out across, like, the tests will be aligned with the different specifications that use the type rather than the general performance entry test suite.
We may want, I think one way to have is to have a test even that says, oh, if the performance long time is not available, then make sure that long task is not present in supported types.
Oh,
Right.
I see. Yeah, I guess we could do that as part of a test on the note itself. By the way.
You mean in performance timeline?
Well, yeah, I mean the note is a spec itself. It's just non-normative, but it's a spec.
Okay.
So we can have a test on that note in WPT that says, make sure that first that test all of the registries to make sure that when you put the prior identifier, then the proper interface is supported, and that there is no false negative.
Yeah.
Or false positive.
False positive, but yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so can I go ahead and publish the registry, or?
I think the registry is fine as long as we put some mechanism to prevent people from just listing all of them.
All right. So
Okay.
I will add a test and move forward to, if the group is okay, to publish the registry.
Yeah, the only thing is we're like, I've seen that it currently only includes the entry types, and not, like we talked about it, also including other parameters, but I guess that's something we can add to it over time. Like, for example, for the buffered, for the registry, we discussed that, like, also including the buffered,
Right.
yeah, the buffered flag and the number of entries.
Okay.
But we can add that,
Alright.
publishing the registry doesn't mean that we'll just PR on that, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I can iterate. Can you open issues in the repo, and then I will add those as well. And I will set up the repo to be on automatic publishing, so any edits to the documents will get automatically reflected. So,
Okay. That sounds great to me. Okay. Any objections? Any plus ones? Okay. Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you, Philippe, for creating that registry. And it looks like that with that we're out of agenda. We didn't have a ton of designs to talk through today. Anything else that someone wants to bring up, or should we call it early today? Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay.
Face to face in 2 weeks.
Yeah, face to face in 2 weeks. I'm super excited and can't wait to see you all there. Those of you that can make it in person, and those that can't, we will have a remote option.
Take care.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.